Let's see. All right, here we go. So welcome, friends, to your free GMAT prep hour. It is October 27th, 2019. My name is Reed Arnold. I will be guiding you through the wonderful world of parallelism this evening. Broadcasting from New York, New York. Actually, it's the last night that I will spend in the offices we have been located at for, oh goodness, before I came. We're moving offices this week, so this is actually my last hurrah in the old home. So goodbye and welcome to the new. First things first, if you're looking for some free prep options, we have other things besides the free GMAT prep hours. Do a Google search of Manhattan Prep free GMAT prep hours. There's a whole library of useful information. Today's recording should go up soon, and you're going to have several different topics and several different teachers all talking about various aspects of the GMAT. You can almost make a full course from those videos. So take a look at that. Really good tips there. For other free options, you can actually go and try the first session of any of our courses is free, online or in person. So go, it's 11% of the course. So you can just show up, see if you like the teacher, see if you like what we're offering, and you can decide to sign up after that. You don't have to sign up before, okay? It's also, frankly, guys, we talk about some really big stuff in class one, some useful tips that you might as well take advantage of it. Talk about data sufficiency, really dig into some strategies there, talk about sentence correction. So take a first class. You can also try our Interact, our on-demand course. It's a video course available to you. A really, really neat program. It's actually a program that adapts to you as you go through it. So if you miss a question, the program will actually give you an easier question. If you get a question right, it'll give you a challenge question. Give you video guide back, video feedback as you work, as various Manhattan Prep instructors teach on that program and still teach for the company. So it's a great way to do some self-paced studying. Today, we are talking about parallelism, okay? Parallel structure in sentence correction. And what I'm hoping for this video to be, if I can be arrogant for a second, is to be like a one-stop shop. If you ever need a review, if you ever have someone who's confused about it, if other teachers ever watch this, I want this to be like, hey, watch this video. This is what you ultimately need to know about GMAT parallel structure, okay? And I've taught the GMAT for 6 or 7 years now, and I find that there's a lot of people have like kind of a surface understanding of parallel structure. They have a sense of what it is. They get kind of the gist of it. I sometimes call it the SAT understanding of parallel structure, and today we're going to go into the GMAT understanding of parallel structure and actually dig into what it is, what it's doing, what it allows. Okay, and we're going to get past kind of that surface level understanding. So what I want to first have you all do is take a look at this sentence that's on the slide here. And I want you to tell me in the chat box what words you think in this sentence are actually in parallel. What words are in parallel structure? What do we think? So Salmi, you say selling. What do you think selling is parallel to? So Salma says selling. We have a call for noticing, selling and noticing. We have someone else is saying buy. Okay. So selling and noticing, selling and buy. Okay, and this is exactly what I want to discuss here. Okay. You might remember from your SAT work, a lot of times there would be a situation where, you know, you'd have a sentence like, Bob enjoys biking, skiing, and hiking. And there was kind of a general sense of like, hey, here's a list of things. They all have to end in ing. And that general understanding is what people carry forward. And so what they kind of look for is like, hey, here's an ing word, here's an ing word, they must be parallel. And that's actually not what parallelism is. Those words are not in parallel structure, even though they are both ing words, okay? This opening modifier here is describing the company, but it is not actually linked to selling. And that's one thing I want to first get out there about parallel structure. It's ultimately about linking things together. And it almost always involves a conjunction. And I say almost always. It always involves a conjunction. Parallel structure must have a conjunction. Where do we have a conjunction here? We have a conjunction at the word but. Here's our conjunction. It is joining things. It is joining parts of the sentence together, and those words that are joined are in parallel. So the things that are actually in parallel here are buy, will buy, and is selling. Those are the words that are actually joined. That whole first part is just description. It doesn't actually join with anything. Okay. Now you might notice that, hey, is selling doesn't look like will buy. In fact, they are totally different tenses, but that's okay. Verb tense does not have to match in parallel structure. All right. I want to look today beyond the aesthetics, get past that appearance understanding of parallelism and actually see what's going on. Every parallel structure has three things that you just want to really lock down. If you can only ever think of parallelism in terms of these three things, you're going to be in good shape. There is always a marker. Okay, in this case, that's the conjunction. There are always the elements. Those are the words that are joined. And there is always the root phrase. The root phrase you can think of as the part of the sentence that flows into the elements and sounds fine. So here you can think of like the company is selling its equity. That sounds fine. The company will buy some back, some equity. That sounds fine. Every parallel structure has these three things. And that's what I want you to look for. And that those words that are joined, they don't have to look alike. Will buy doesn't look like is selling. But how are they alike? How are these two words, these two pairs of words, how are they similar ultimately? What are they both? They are verbs. Sonny is exactly right. They are verbs that the company is doing or will do. They are conjugated verbs. And that's the rule. When a conjunction joins parts of a sentence, the parts of a sentence must be the same kind of word. Either ing modifiers, verbs that are conjugated, infinitive forms of the verb, subjects that, two subjects that end up doing a verb together, whatever it is, they have to be the same kind of word. Nouns, prepositions, modifiers, conjugated verbs, what have you. And they don't have to look exactly the same, but they have to be the same kind of thing, right? And that's what I really want you all to get through today is don't look at the appearance, look at the type and the thing that joins them. Okay. Now we've seen conjunctions, or hopefully we will see conjunctions do other things, and we understand that conjunctions do other things. What is this verb here doing, this but? It is a conjunction, I'm sorry, this verb, this conjunction but. What is it doing in this sentence? Do we have parallel structure? What do you think? So I have some people who say, no, I don't have parallel structure. And that's true. I don't have parallel structure here. In fact, if I don't have parallel structure, what's going on with this conjunction? What is it doing? This conjunction here is joining clauses. Okay? We have a structure like this in this sentence. We have a subject verb and then a conjunction, comma conjunction, subject verb. Okay? And that is not parallel. That's joining clauses. It's one of the major functions of conjunctions. They join clauses together. A clause, I try not to use too many grammar, like official grammar words, because you don't need them. But a clause is a subject doing a verb. And every sentence has a clause or several clauses. Okay? And if there are several clauses, they usually have to be joined by some kind of conjunction, as we see here. But here's kind of the secret. Salma asks if the use of but is wrong in this sentence. I don't think so. I would not. I don't think it is incorrect. If a conjunction is not doing what it's doing in the sentence above, if it is not joining independent clauses, many experts think the market will correct. the company is selling its equity. If it's not joining clauses, it is doing parallel structure every time. Okay, so how do I know? What do I look for to determine if parallelism is involved? I find conjunctions and I check what comes after. And if what comes after is a subject doing a verb, it's almost certainly not parallelism. There's a rare exception where it could be, but that is highly unusual. Most of the time, if it's a subject doing a verb, that is not parallelism. And if it's not a subject doing a verb, it is definitely parallelism. Okay? So the key is find conjunctions. Those are the things that tell you whether or not parallelism is in play. Okay? The markers of parallel structure. Here's that first sentence we had before. I like to think of parallel structure, sometimes I like to visualize it with a fork. It's like a fork in the road. Okay? You don't have time to actually draw this if you're in the middle of the test, but it is a good way to think about parallelism and to practice visualizing it. You could, draw your own when you're studying a sentence. That's the most fun thing you've ever heard in your life, right? I'm going to draw my parallelism forks to get better at the GMAT. I know. But you could do it to get better and get a deeper sense of how parallelism works, right? You have the root phrase over here, and then you have the elements that run, and this kind of gives a nice visualization, right, of why it's called parallelism, because you can actually see that they are parallel. They are running in parallel. And ultimately, what parallel structure allows you to do is tell two sentences at once. You run the algorithm of the sentence at the same time. And that root phrase you can think of as distributing to the elements. The company is selling its equity. The company will buy some equity back. Okay? And you have the marker that indicates there's kind of the fork in the road. And so today what we're really going to talk about are the different ways we can have forks in the road, the different conjunctions you can see, just how to recognize where parallelism is and the different ways parallelism is built. And we're going to use the same colors throughout. The green is going to be for root phrases, the blue is going to be for elements, and the red is going to be for the markers. Okay? So Laura asks, do the elements have to have this to be the same grammatical type? And that is exactly right. That is the rule of parallelism. They have to be the same kind of word. Prepositions joined with prepositions. Nouns joined with nouns. Adjectives joined with adjectives. ING modifiers joined with ING modifiers. Okay? They don't have to look the exact same all the time because, as we saw here, these are both conjugated verbs. Is, selling, will, buy. But they look different. That's okay. They're the same kind of grammar. Conjugated verbs. Okay. So is this sentence an example of parallelism or just part? Sunny, no, the verb tense does not matter. Verb tense does not have to be parallel. Okay, it's a common misconception. That's why I do this sentence first. Okay, Bianca asked if this is an example of parallelism or just part of it. And I'm not entirely sure what your question is, Bianca. This sentence has parallel structure in it. The parallel structure is here at the company is selling, but will buy some back. Like this first part of the sentence, I see, Bianca. There's no other parallel structure in this sentence, no. The rest of the sentence is other stuff. Okay, so here's a question. I'm gonna give you all here, we have 5 sentences. I'll give you all 4 minutes, 3-4 minutes, I'll time you here. And I want you all to try to find the markers, the elements, and the root phrases, okay? Practice just seeing the parallel structure. That's all we're gonna be doing today. So I'm gonna go off camera for a little bit, see how we do. All right, that's about 3 minutes. Before we go over that, Rob had a great question that I want to address now, and it's definitely worth taking this moment here. So Rob asked, hey, what about commas? What's the deal with commas in parallelism? And let's just take a quick second to discuss commas. Commas, just so you all know, in general, I rarely use commas to determine whether or not an answer is right or wrong in GMAT sentence correction. The only, I don't want to say the only time, but one of the only times that I use a comma to determine if something is right or wrong is if there's not a comma before a conjunction subject verb. What I mean by that is it's like, if I have a sentence, he is tall, and she is athletic. These are simple sentences, so this is kind of a obviously the GMAT will be more complicated than this, but it's like, okay, I have a clause, he is tall. I have a clause, she is athletic. I have the conjunction joining them. I have to have that comma before. If I have a sentence that says he is tall and she is athletic, that would be incorrect on the GMAT. Okay, if I have two clauses joined by a conjunction, again, there's one small exception I will talk about here in just a second, but virtually always there must be a comma before that conjunction and. And if there's not one, I mark that sentence wrong. That's just structurally wrong. If I have clause, conjunction clause, there must be a comma. With parallelism, the comma, there's a lot more variety. Most of the time you won't see a comma. She is tall and athletic. He cooks for a restaurant and bikes for Mountain Dew. I don't know what I'm saying there, but like two things that he does, right? I don't actually need a comma for the parallel structure, okay? I just have the conjunction joining the things that he does, he cooks, he bikes, joining the things that she is, tall and athletic, okay? So I don't need a comma here, but sometimes you will see sentences that do have a comma, right? He cooks, and usually it's going to be for sentences that have a little bit of like a long break throughout the parallel, not a long break, has a lot of words in the parallel structure. So it's like he cooks for a restaurant down the street from the best billiards club in town, comma, and bikes for a company that is known for selling athletic merchandise, whatever. So notice that just there's a lot of words in that parallel structure. And so when I have the marker and joining the words bikes and cooks, it's okay that there's a comma. Now it might be okay also if there's not a comma. I wouldn't really choose between that. No, James, is not is the second sentence a modifying phrase? There is, when you say the second sentence, there's only one sentence here, so I don't know what you mean. And this right here, these are two verbs that he does. He cooks and bikes. And so there could be a comma here for clarity sometimes. There might not be a comma there. I don't know, the GMAT's kind of wishy-washy with that. Yeah, so this after the comma, in this bottom sentence here, this is not a modifying phrase. It's a conjunction other verb. It's parallelism. We have conjunction bikes. He cooks and bikes. And there could be a comma, there could not be a comma. Okay? But I know I need a comma if I have clause, new clause, right? He cooks and he bikes. I would have to have a comma for that. Now, the only time where I might not need a comma for joining clauses is in that really rare instance where parallelism is done with full clauses. This is getting a little bit more in the weeds than I intended, but that's okay. So here's a sentence where you might not have a comma before a conjunction clause. Although he is tall and she is athletic, they never formed a basketball team. Okay. This is the one rare instance where parallelism is being done with full clauses. And the reason we can use full clauses, although he is tall and she is athletic, these are both paired with although. Okay, and so that's the, we don't have a comma before that conjunction and, because that's not really needed here. We are joining two clauses with the word although. So you could have basically although, and then up here he is tall, and although she is athletic. And those are joined, those full clauses in this instance are what are joined in the parallel fork. Although he is tall, although she is athletic, and then we have the marker and. So this is a really, really rare structure, but I do want to point out that it can sometimes happen. It's the only time I don't need a comma before that conjunction joining clauses together. Most of the time, if clauses are joined, you have to have a comma. And in parallelism, you can have a comma or not. There's no real rule there. Okay. So that's a good question about commas. A little bit in the weeds, but definitely shows up and worth discussing. Okay. So let's go back to the test here. All right. Here are the answers. Let's go ahead and show you this slide. The green are the root phrases, the red are the markers, and the blue are what is joined. In some of the sentences for clarity, I have whited out some of the other words so that the structure can be more clear. Okay, so take a second, look at what is joined by the markers and look at the root phrases. If there are any questions, let me know. I'll just let you all read for a moment. Notice how some of these answers, some of these examples have two markers. Right? That'll show up in an instance like both thrilled and disappointed, either by hydraulic pressure or by geologic forces. Okay? Those are called closed markers. We call them closed markers because they kind of close in one of the elements. Notice that thrilled is bookended by the markers. Okay, notice that by hydraulic pressure is bookended. Closed markers tend to be a little bit nicer for you because they tell you exactly where the parallelism is going to start. As soon as you see the word both, you know that that's the first part of parallel structure. As soon as you see the word either, that's the first part. You see not only, that's the first part of a parallel structure. The other kind of marker is in these other sentences we call open. It's open because it doesn't have a start. It's just all of a sudden you get there and it's like, hey, parallelism is happening. Now I have to go back and fill in the rest. So here in this second sentence, but that one can avoid that psychological trap. Oh, all of a sudden I have to find, okay, what matches with that? The other that. Psychologists believe that, but that. Okay. If we go back to the sentences as they were written originally here, all of a sudden it's like, hey, oh man, I have parallelism now. And all of a sudden it's like, where does that start? Oh, it starts here. On statement 4, is the second by, after, or needed? Good question, Pilar. Yes, we will see an example. We'll actually use this exact sentence, I believe. There are some, I should say here, there are some instances of like miniature parallelism that I didn't really highlight, like oil and gas. Those are technically parallel. I think that's the big one. Okay, but most of the big structures here are as laid out in this slide. Okay. Verbs entice, surprise, and satisfy. ways that gas can migrate underground by hydraulic pressure, by geologic forces. Things that describe how movies are written in the 3-act structure, giving them a familiarity, creating a predictability, modifiers of that clause, things that psychologists believe, and responses to Game of Thrones. I hope we've all recovered from the Game of Thrones finale. I mostly have. Mostly. Okay. So, the power of the marker. Really, one thing we're emphasizing today is the conjunction, the thing that does the joining. Here's an example of a sentence. Here's the first part of a sentence. The magician enjoys creating magic tricks and blank. What comes next? And here's the thing. There's a lot of different structures that can be built. I want you all to brainstorm here. What are some ends of this sentence that build different parallel structures? Waiting for girlfriends, yeah, okay, that could be. Vanishing cards, okay. Enjoys eating cake. Okay, so I'm gonna make a list here. We have waiting for girlfriends. Didn't know that one was coming. Vanishing cards. Enjoys eating cake. Illusions. It's gonna be a little bit hard to see inside. Blowing balloons with his nose. And now here's the question. So waiting for girlfriends, vanishing cards, enjoys eating cake, surprising guests, running from the cops. Okay, so we're kind of getting stuck here on a certain version of the parallel structure, and that's fine. Running from the cops. I don't know what this magician did, but we're using a lot of ing words, which is fine. That's allowed. That would be joining what words in the sentence? What words would we join with running from the cops, surprising guests, blowing balloons with his nose? I would be joining and, running. That would join with what word? Creating. And that's definitely a version of the parallel structure that's allowed. But there are others. I'm not just stuck creating ing parallelism. It can be another noun similar to magic tricks. That's what Lee just said. That's exactly right, which someone said earlier. Someone said illusions, right? Enjoys creating magic tricks and illusions. Enjoys creating magic tricks and, what else would creating magic tricks and surprises. Yeah, creates surprises. Fires, likes to create fires. I don't know. Sure, okay. Now, what else could I join with, though? So I've joined words with magic tricks. I've joined words with creating. What else could I join in parallel structure here? I could join something with enjoys. That would be what kind of word? What would be an example of parallel structure built with the word enjoys? Loves. And loves, I don't know, chocolate. What else could I say? He enjoys creating magic tricks, and it would be a verb, Sophia, exactly. Hates, what does the magician hate? Hates bad movies. Hates watching Game of Thrones. Hates loud kids. Good. Drives quickly. Lives in New York. Good. Okay. Very good. So here's the thing. We have here different versions of parallel structure that all start the same way. And they're all fine. There's nothing wrong with any of them. Here, these are things the magician enjoys creating. Here are things that activities the magician enjoys doing. Here are verbs the magician does. How do we know which is which? We have to look after the marker and then go back and match it with something else in the sentence. Okay? And that's why you really zoom in, put on the microscope the conjunctions, the markers. They tell you what's going on with the structure. Brian asks, is the second element always directly after the marker? And the answer is yes, with like some kind of warnings. Let's actually go back here. I think I had an example. like if we look at number 3, right? Here's the marker, but, and then there's this word perhaps, which is like kind of an extra word. So we can get rid of that, right? The word is creating and giving. So sometimes there's like a few extra description words in between, but ultimately, yes, the second element or third in certain instances, like down here in number 5, satisfies the third element. The last element always comes right after the marker, right after the last marker, unless there's maybe a few description words in between. That happens sometimes. But by and large, Brian, that's exactly what I want you to kind of get out of today's class, is like find the marker and look after that, because that is where the parallelism is clearest. And then you go back and you match with that word, with that kind of word, rather. Okay? So when does this become a problem? What are some issues we might have with parallelism? Take a look at this sentence, similar to the one we just saw. What parallel structure is built here? Bianca, the questions we just saw, yes, these are all correct forms of parallel structure. Okay? Those are all fine. Now here, what is joint? So Salma says create and perform. Likes to create, likes to perform. That could be. But there's a little bit of a problem in this one. It might help to notice that I've actually pluralized magician. It's now magicians. Why does that create an issue here? Am I saying, good, now we're seeing that. Am I joining create with perform, or am I joining like with perform? The structure is actually very ambiguous, and that's bad on the GMAT. Bad, ambiguous structure is something the GMAT tries to avoid as much as possible. Okay, so what parallel structure is being built? It's really not clear. How would we clear this up? Well, now Selma, 2 is not a marker. 2 is not a marker. Okay, and is the marker. But if I want to clear this up, take a look at these 2 sentences. This one, if we had to choose between these, which one would we choose? We would choose the second, because it's unambiguous. That marker and has to perform, and that has to join with to create. And then we could say those are things the magicians like to do. Whereas in this first sentence, it's unclear if I want to say the magicians like to create and they like to perform, or if they like to create and perform. So you would choose this. How would you say the first one and be clear? Well, you'd have to say something like the magicians like to create magic tricks. They also perform on stage. I don't know, something like this would clear up that sentence so that I don't have that ambiguous parallel structure. You might have to get rid of the parallel structure, perhaps. But if you're given a choice between these 2 sentences, okay, you should choose the one that cleans up the ambiguity by bringing in this to into the element, because then it's clear to create is matched with to perform. Another thing you could do, Salma, that's a good point. The other thing I could do is say the magicians like, instead of using the infinitive, I can say like creating magic tricks and performing on stage. When I get rid of that infinitive form of the verb, I clear up the ambiguity. Like creating and performing. That would definitely clear up the ambiguity as well. It's another solution there. The key is that you just have to be consistent. Okay. Pilar, if I say the magicians, it is correct. Create magic tricks. Perform on stage. It is technically correct, but I have changed the meaning of the sentence. Now it's not clear what the magicians like. Here it's just the things the magicians do. Well, what do the magicians like? That's lost in the meaning here. Okay. Yasmin asks, why can't the root be the magicians like to? It can be, Yasmin. That's totally fine. But the problem is that both interpretations here are pretty much equally valid. And think about how it changes the meaning. Here, these are things the magician likes to do. The magician likes to create. The magician likes to perform. Likes to create, likes to perform. Here, it's not clear that the magician likes to perform on stage. The magicians like to perform on stage. Now it's just the magicians do perform on stage. And we've lost that they like to. And I don't know if that's what I'm trying to say or not. I think I'm trying to say they like to perform on stage. And since that's what I'm trying to say, let's just clear it up by either putting the to there, that will clear it up, or by doing what I forgot someone suggested, turning them into ing words. The magicians like creating magic tricks and performing on stage. Now there's no ambiguity. Perfect. I know what's going on. I know what the magicians like to do. But that subtle change in structure can really clear up meaning or change the meaning. Okay. So I think after this, let me see if, no, not yet, not quite. So take a look here. Okay. Similar game, find the difference and find how the structure and meaning change in this sentence, these two sentences. Good. So the difference is this word that. Okay. Well, why is that important? Why is that important in this sentence? It's because it clears up what I'm trying to say. Am I trying to say most psychologists believe that, but that, like the things that psychologists believe, or am I trying to say most psychologists believe this, but one can avoid that? Like where the author is trying to tell you that can be avoided. This trap can be avoided. Or am I trying to say psychologists believe the trap can be avoided? The omission of the word that totally muddles the meaning, right? What am I trying to say here? This is what I think I'm trying to say. I think I'm trying to say most psychologists believe that changing one's mind is difficult, but most psychologists believe that one can avoid that trap. I think that's what I'm trying to say. But if I don't include the that, it's actually not clear if I'm doing parallel structure or starting a new clause. Okay, and so that second that totally seals the deal. Now everything's clear. It's not an idiom, James. It's just parallel structure. Not an idiom, just parallel structure. Okay. The best way to clear this up is to take the that away from the root phrase. Oops. Take this out of the root phrase and put it over here. And then also down here. And now it's clear. Okay. So let's take a look at these sentences. And this will get to someone's question earlier about, do I need the by or do I not need the by? A lot of parallelism issues deal with things that nobody ever would care about except on the GMAT. That's just the fate we've all signed up for by either taking or teaching this test. We have to care about things that just don't matter, okay? But take a look at these sentences, find the markers, find the elements, and specify where there might be a mistake. So Lee says in the first sentence, either or is the marker. Either or, and that's correct. And so Lee also says, so we have to use by twice, and that is also exactly correct. Okay? And Laura points out that in the second one, will is incorrect, and that's exactly correct as well. Okay? So if we look at this, if we look at the sentence here, if we look at the structure and highlight the root phrase markers and elements, we have either by or by. But in the second sentence here, I have either by or forces, and that's wrong. I have to have the second by. Now, I could change the sentence where I don't need the second by. I would have to say, oil and gas migrate deep underground, comma, by either X or Y. If I build the sentence that way, then I don't need, in fact, I can't repeat that by. That would be a problem. Since it's outside of the elements, it's in the root phrase. Okay, this would be the root phrase here. And then the elements would be X or Y. Either is fine. Parallelism is about relationships. It's about being consistent. You always have to check the whole structure. It's not that one is always right and one is always wrong. It's in the structure that is built what is right and what is wrong. Okay? And that second one, we have a talented chef can entice, surprise, and satisfy. A talented chef can entice, surprise, and will satisfy. Wait, what? Okay. Here's the parallelism fork. And I just have different words by hydraulic pressure or geologic forces. And if I try to read the root phrase into this, oil and gas migrate deep underground by hydraulic pressure. Sure. Oil and gas migrate deep underground geologic forces. That's not a sentence. Parallelism maintains sentences. You can run both sentences, both paths, and it should sound fine. Okay, the second sentence here. A talented chef can entice, sure. A talented chef can surprise, sure. A talented chef can will satisfy. That's not a sentence. That doesn't make sense. Okay. Entice, surprise, will satisfy. These are supposed to be things the chef can do. How can a chef will satisfy? That makes sense. Okay. These are, again, things that you would not care about in day-to-day life because you get the point, you move on. The GMAT, you have to notice that and be like, ah, big change. Last but not least, we have what's called nested parallelism. Take a look at this sentence. This is a fun one. Let's just take a vote. I'm just curious. I just want you to say right or wrong, whether or not you think the sentence is good or bad, correct or incorrect. What do we think? Just take a vote. So good, wrong, good, wrong, good. About 50-50 so far. Good. Incorrect. Good, but needs some commas. Good. Sounds weird. Wrong. Okay, so about 50-50 it seems. Some commas might clear this up, perhaps, but this sentence is actually fine. And you're like, but Reed, there are 3 ands. And it's just like, there's so many ands. And I get you, but here's the thing, all of them are fine. If I map out the structure here, if I map out the parallelism that's built, it's okay. I have nested parallelism. I have parallel structure within a parallel structure. That's fun. Okay, but depending on where I look in the sentence, I can have, you know, an element where, so performed in plays and feature films. So we have a structure there. We have a parallel structure there, things the actress performed in. Okay, we have a similar thing where we have sang songs. Oh, don't use that color. We have a marker and. We have sang songs as the root phrase, and we have in musicals and on the radio as the elements. That's the bottom parallel structure. Okay? And then there's like the super parallel structure, which are things that the actress did. The actress performed, the actress sang. And this is totally okay. It's just a lot of parallelism being built. Notice that every branch completes a sentence. The actress performed in plays, sentence. The actress performed in feature films, sentence. The actress sang songs in musicals, sentence. The actress sang songs on the radio, sentence. And here are 2 nouns, plays and feature films. These are nouns that the actress performed in musicals and on the radio. Those are prepositions. Where the actress sang songs, all is well. So nested parallelism can be kind of trippy because you have to keep a superstructure in mind as you look at little structures. Is it fine that sang songs is in the past tense? Yeah, that's fine. That's when she sang them. So this is parallelism within parallelism. Take a look at this sentence here. So longer, the structure is actually a little easier, believe it or not. It's just harder to see it. Chris, I'm glad this is helpful. I hope that is my goal. I hope you walk away from this with a deeper understanding of what parallelism actually is. So take a look at this sentence. There's nested parallelism here as well. See if we can spot it. There's a lot of words. This is basically a sentence that's a whole paragraph. But where is the nested parallel structure? Remember, parallelism hinges on conjunctions. Where do you see the conjunctions? Good, so we found one. And proceeded is matched with murdered. Very good. What other parallel structure do we find? Mentioning his brother's name or keeping coins with his brother's face. Very good. That's the nested parallelism. Very good. Okay. Caracalla, who murdered his own brother. Caracalla, who proceeded to slaughter thousands. He was, by the way, a nasty dude. Not often talked about in history, but oh man, a true villain. Slaughter thousands for such acts as mentioning and keeping. Those are the things that he slaughtered people for doing. So we have this little parallel structure inside the bigger parallel structure, all describing who Caracalla was. Okay, so that's you have some sentences on the GMAT, parallelism within parallelism. All right, I think. Let's see if that was okay. So by and large, guys, that's it. Why is it mentioning and keeping, not or? I chose why. I think mentioning or keeping. I think you're asking why is it or and not and. Kathy, I think that might be your question, and it could be and as well. I just or shows that like if it's and, it might imply you have to do both. I don't know. Or just showed like you could do this or this, and you're going to get killed either way. Whereas and is like you have to do both of the things. Maybe. I don't know. It just or seemed to make a little. Oh, I see. You're right. Excuse me. That's the question. That should be or. You're exactly right. Yeah. Thank you. Good catch. Good catch. That should be or. Thank you all. Good catch. Okay. So that's it, guys. That is parallelism. That's all you need to know. I know it's not. Maybe we just talked about it for an hour, so it's not easy. But this is the game. If you can understand what we just talked about over the last 55 minutes, you can do the GMAT parallel structure. The key is, can you find it? Can you notice it? So what I want to do here for the last 5 minutes, and I might go a little bit long just for a little bit of extra practice, I pulled up some actual questions from the GMAT. And all I want you to do, you're not going to do the sentences. And this is something you can do at home when you're trying to get better at a certain skill, whatever the skill is you need. Instead of actually do a question, just go to the sentence correction part of the book and find whatever it is you're trying to work on and look at that structure, that type of grammar, whatever it is. So all I want you to do now is not try to do this sentence and try to get it right. All I want you to do is find parallelism. That's the goal. Find markers, elements, root phrases, nothing else. We're not talking about what is right or wrong. That's not the point. I just want you to find parallelism in this sentence here. Okay, I'll come back here in a minute or so. Okay, remember the goal is not to do this question. I don't care, I'm not trying to get answers, I'm not trying to do it, I'm just trying to say, hey, where's some parallel structure, okay? And if you were looking, you should have found some parallel structure here in the middle. We have markers both. And now if you notice that the parallel structure is wrong, great, that's what we're trying to get better at. So how the airline can both increase and compete. That's good parallel structure. How the airline can both increase and must compete. I don't love it. Must now determine both how to make and compete. That's wrong. If I'm going to start with how to make, I then need how to compete. That has to be the same kind of thing. How the airline can both increase and compete. That's good. How the airline can both increase and also how to make. That is wrong. These are not parallel. Okay. So this is what you should have found. Okay. Instances of parallel structure. I don't care which one's right or wrong. That's not the point of this drill. This is how I want you to sometimes practice sentence correction. Just pick a thing you need to get better at, find instances of it, and think about that thing only and don't even do the sentence. Okay? Let's try, let's not do that one. Let's do, sure, take a few minutes, a minute or so, a minute and a half to look at this one. Okay, it's about a minute and a half. Again, I'm going a little bit faster these because I'm technically out of time, but I'm going to stick it. If you need to go, I totally get it. I'm just going to give a few more examples just because I want this to be a nice full lesson. I'll go a little long just to have the recording, if nothing else. So, but here's where you find parallelism. Not every answer choice had it. Okay. In A and B, I didn't really find any parallel structure, but in C, D, and E, I did find some. And it was different, but here's where we have. We have heavily barbed and staying where it's inserted, describing the honeybee stinger. Heavily barbed and staying, I don't think those are the same kind of word, personally. Staying is an ing modifier. Heavily barbed is just an adjective. I don't know. I don't feel great about that. Here I have stays and results, verbs that are joined. And then I have the heavily barbed stinger stays, the heavily barbed stinger results. And I know that's wrong because the heavily barbed stinger doesn't result in the act of stinging, causing any, like that's just bad structure. And then in E, I have the stinger is barbed and stays where it is inserted. Okay, so I have verbs now joined with the honeybee stinger. Gabby, no, just because there's no parallel structure doesn't mean an answer is wrong. That's not necessarily true. And that's not to be clear, that's not the point of today's lesson. The point is not that parallelism is always good. In fact, sometimes the parallelism is always wrong and you need to choose an answer without parallelism. But the drill today is just where is there parallelism? Where is it good? Where is it not? Okay. Find the conjunctions. The GMAT requires you to care about little words that no one ever thinks about. Conjunctions, prepositions, that kind of stuff. So the reason I think D is wrong, it's subtle, but if I find the markers, stays and results, and the root phrase, the heavily barbed stinger, I have the heavily barbed stinger stays where it is inserted. okay? The heavily barbed stinger results in the act of stinging, causing the bee to sustain a fatal injury. It's saying that the stinger results in something. And if I take that very literally, I just don't, I think like it's not the fact the stinger doesn't result in something. It's the fact that the stinger stays where it is inserted that results in the act of stinging. But in this parallel structure in D, I don't actually have the fact that it stays where it's inserted be the thing that results in the act of stinging. I just have the stinger results in the act of stinging, causing the bee to die. It's just a subtle thing where no. The thing that causes the bee to die is that the stinger stays. The stinger itself, that's not quite enough. It's a subtle meaning thing, but welcome to the GMAT. It's how it works sometimes. Okay. Well, this is a good one. Take a minute and a half or so for the sentence here. Okay, this one's fun. If you're a nerd teacher of the GMAT like I am, it's fun. We have the marker and it happens right before the underline. That's interesting, okay. And this is actually gonna, depending on what comes next, we're gonna have a few options of what the root phrase and what the elements are. If I start with banked and banked with dirt, the elements seem to be joined with overlaid. It's framework of poles, overlaid with slabs of bark, and banked with dirt. If what comes next is was banked, okay, so sorry, before you get to was banked, you might be like, well, Reed, this is also banked. Why are you not dealing with it up here? Because banked here seems to be describing something. Something is banked with dirt. In C, I have banked them. And that makes this an active verb. Something banked them with dirt. So it's actually not description anymore like overlaid, it's actually a verb. And so if I'm going to do a verb, I need to match it with another verb. And where's the other verb? Was conical. And same thing with was banked. That is now a verb. It's a passive verb, was banked. So I need to find another verb to join it with, was conical. And that changes the root phrase entirely. Am I trying to say its framework of poles was banked with dirt? Am I trying to say the single family house banked something with dirt? I don't think so. Am I trying to say the single family house was banked with dirt? And that's I mean, again, we're not trying to get into whether or not, where the right answer is today. What's more important, frankly, is that you just know the difference. that you can spot the difference. If you can't spot this difference, you can't then ask which one is right. And it's, you know, I think what I'm trying to say is that the framework of poles was banked with dirt, not the house itself. So I lean towards A and B. But if I can't even spot the difference, I can't even ask myself this question. The framework of poles overlaid with slabs of bark and banked with dirt. Yeah, okay, cool. That's how we're propping up the framework of poles. Whereas down here in D and E, I'm saying that the house was banked with dirt. It was conical and was banked. I just don't think that's right. Okay. So notice how what comes after that marker changes entirely what the structure is and where the elements are and what the root phrase is. And again, that's how I want you to think about parallelism. You find the marker, you find what comes next, you find what matches. Oh man, so many good choices here. Yeah, let's do this one. Okay, we go off camera, take a minute, minute and a half, find the parallelism. Don't try to get anything right, that's not the point, just find. Okay, that's about a minute 50. A lot of parallelism here, a lot of different versions of it. Okay. Most of them, the root phrase is going to be this New York City ordinance. It regulated, mandated, required, and it granted. Well, we never actually finished the parallel structure. We introduced a new subject-verb clause here. It granted pedestrians the right of way. But I never actually finished the list. It regulated, mandated, required, and granted would be better. But I have a new subject-verb. That's wrong. In B, the city ordinance regulated, mandated, required, granting. Again, we never finish this verb list. We never actually say, and, you know, we need to finish the verb list. We never do. That's wrong. In C, we have the ordinance mandated, required, and it granted. That's wrong. In D, the ordinance regulating, mandating, requiring, and granted. That's wrong. So this one we actually do get to a right answer here just based on the structure, seeing what words are joined in which answer. In E, we have the ordinance mandated, required, and granted. That's right. All the other ones have bad parallel structure. They start a list and never finish it. They start a list and then introduce a new clause instead of finishing. It's never, the only one that has good parallel structure is E. And if you're reading all this other stuff, why? You're wasting time. That's the beauty of noticing parallel structure, being able to pinpoint where the things are. So you don't have to look at everything else. You can just check the parallel structure. Okay. I'm going to do one more, and then we're going to call it for a night, just because I like this last example as well. Okay. Take a minute or so for this. Okay. Where do we have parallelism? Well, the most important moment is here, outside the underline, and that this robe depicted. So we have to join, we don't have a choice there. We're stuck with and that this robe depicted, and we have to find something that matches it. Well, some of the answer choices don't have any parallel structure to match that. They don't have another that, right? Blank that and that. So we have to find the ones that do. Well, A has a new woolen robe that they use to dress. Okay, but if I look at that structure, it's a robe that they use to dress, and it's a robe that this robe depicted. Wait. A robe that this robe depicted. Did a robe depict a robe? Did that this robe depict a robe that this robe depicted scenes of battle? A robe that this robe depicted scenes of battle. Wait, what? What am I talking about? What's going on there? I don't know. That doesn't make sense. It's because it's wrong. Same thing with C. A robe that they used to dress and that this robe depicted. What? That structure makes no sense. It's technically parallel, I guess, but it just makes no sense. And so this parallelism with those that's has to be wrong. D is sneaky. The that comes way, way, way earlier. And then it's, okay, the records indicate that women collaborated to weave a robe, and the records indicate that this robe depicted a scene of battle. Cool. That's good parallel structure. But we have to find we have to find a match for this that, and the only one that works is here in answer choice D. So again, we get to a right answer here, even though that wasn't the point of the drill. I guess we'd have to figure out why well, because the others don't have parallel structure, and they have to. I'm stuck with and that. Okay? So I'm telling you, friends, if you can start seeing parallel structure, it will cut through answer choices like hot knives through butter. But I find that students don't work to learn in this way. They don't work to see the parallelism in this way. And if you just do the drill we just did with these 4 or 5 questions again and again and again, and really practice finding the marker, the elements, the root phrase, you can just cut through answers. Okay, it'll make you better. It'll get you better scores. Get past the SAT understanding. Oh, ing words need to match. Ing words look the same. That's not at all enough for GMAT parallelism. Okay, so Brian asks, when you have markers in the underline section, is there any rule when you choose an answer to find parallel structure or choices without parallelism? It depends very much on the sentence. That's a tough question, Brian, because it depends on what the sentence is trying to say and whether or not I need parallelism or not. It depends what's not in the underline. You know, if I have something not in the underline that matches the marker element in the underline, it depends. There's no cut and dry answer to this, you know. There's no way to say like what parallelism always is and what parallelism is always wrong. It's always a kind of a per sentence thing. But if you're really good at finding the parts of parallelism, the markers, the elements, and the root phrase, you can do the kind of thinking we've demonstrated today, where we see, do those elements match? Does the root phrase make sense with those elements? Is there a problem with the elements? Do they not congeal? Are they different kinds of words? Hinges on conjunctions. So Yasmin asks, I thought that young Athenian women was the root phrase. Is there any tips on how to recognize the root phrase easily? The best, I mean, again, it's going to start at the marker. Okay, it's going to start with the marker and in this case. And then we have and that this robe depicted. And so I'm stuck with that as part of the parallel structure. Somewhere, something needs to join with, I'm sorry, I should put the and as the branch. But I have that word and so I'm stuck with parallel structure that joins that this robe depicted with something else. And so I have to find a root phrase that flows into that. Something that this robe depicted. And young Athenian women, that this robe depicted a scene of battle. I guess I should finish this. That this robe depicted a scene of battle. Depicted scenes of battle. Okay. A young Athenian women, that this robe depicted scenes of battle. That can't be the root phrase. That doesn't make sense. Okay. So you start with the marker. You see the thing that is joining stuff. Then you see what thing, maybe find the first thing after the marker to see what is being joined, then find another part of the sentence that seems to match that part of the sentence, and then you find the root phrase. It's done in little pieces here. But I can't have young Athenian women, young women. If that's the root phrase, young women, that this robe depicted scenes of battle. That's not a sentence. That doesn't make sense. So you find the root phrase by finding the elements. You find the elements by finding the marker. Again, rewatch this video because that's what this video is about ultimately. Kathy asks, could we have tackled this using modifiers? I don't know. I don't think so. I don't know. I'll look at it after the recording's up. I don't believe so. This is the best split here is parallelism. All right, friends. Before I log off the recording of this hour 20, this free GMAT prep hour 20, what questions can I answer about parallelism specifically? And then I'll log off the recording for any other general questions here. All right, I'll stick around for a little bit. For those of you watching the recording, thank you. I hope this was useful. I hope you're deepening your understanding of parallel structure and you're going to start using this stuff in your practice on the GMAT. Okay, because this is, frankly, all you could ever need to know about parallelism. You know more about it now than you'll ever need to, but for the GMAT, it will be helpful. I will see you all soon. I actually have another free GMAT prep hour coming up, I think in a week. It's either a week or 2 weeks, very soon. So I hope to see some of you all there. Otherwise, I hope this was useful. Have a wonderful night. wonderful study period. Best of luck on the GMAT.